And welcome to our presentation today, everyone. We are so glad that you're here for this important topic related to building language comprehension for the betterment of reading comprehension. My name is Dr. Maria Murray, and I am the founder and CEO of the Reading League. We are a nonprofit whose mission is to advance the awareness, understanding, and use of evidence-aligned reading instruction. Some disclosures before I begin. The Reading League will receive a stipend for this presentation, and the Reading League receives funding through grants, donations, and other services related to programs such as our conference, journal, and the professional development we provide in schools. Thank you again for joining us. I'm very happy to have worked with Dr. Leslie Laud on this presentation, who will introduce herself now.
Hi, good morning, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy lives to come and join us to think about building language comprehension. I'm so happy and grateful to have had the chance to collaborate with Dr. Maria Murray on this topic. My disclosures include that I receive income from adjuncting, federal grant, research projects, consulting to schools, presentations, and royalties on books and courses I've authored. I also want to give a quick shout out to Faith Borkowski and Rebecca Miles for many long, deep conversations and insights on this topic.
So friends, the title of this presentation you signed up for is on this slide. It's something we all know to be true, right? That background knowledge and vocabulary play a role in building language comprehension. When we started working on the content for this presentation today, we came to realize something. Rather than focus on the roles that background knowledge and vocabulary play in fostering language comprehension, we should also dig into how to build language comprehension. There is a difference between the roles they play versus what it takes to intentionally build knowledge so that ultimately a really, really wonderful thing happens. Students build knowledge and language comprehension on their own. So to define role, let's say we want our students to comprehend a cute text about dog training. I'm a dog lover. If students have some background knowledge about vocabulary related to dogs and some dog training aspects, yay, they're going to better comprehend it, right? So in that regard, absolutely, we all agree that background knowledge does play an important role in helping readers to better build language comprehension with this text. On the other hand, and we've all experienced this, students might lack background knowledge and vocabulary about dog training and its related concepts. So what do we have to do? We have to help build that for them. We can pre-teach vocabulary. We can pre-teach conceptual understandings, yeah. And we can go one step further. We can use strategy instruction to work with them to build their abilities to extract these pieces on their own, to help them learn on their own. What an exciting concept, isn't it? So building knowledge for language comprehension is different from the roles that they play, those discrete roles, how they make that happen. Building knowledge for and with students through strategy instruction will help them become more strategic readers. Strategy instruction, that's what allows them to utilize and enhance that background knowledge and vocabulary, and other components too, to really, 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 really build language comprehension. So we took the liberty of tweaking the title to show that focus on understanding the importance of strategy instruction in building language comprehension. So now let's look at the agenda for this presentation, examine the relationship between all of these things on the language comprehension portion of Scarborough's reading rope. Here we are. We're going to highlight the misunderstandings about building student background knowledge that seem to have taken root in the past several years. How it's been perceived as the lever that's going to move language comprehension forward. Dr. Laud will be sharing a number of quotes from scientists and experts who've been pointing out such misconceptions. And then we're going to spend the remaining part of today's presentation on how to take full advantage of strategy instruction to build that language comprehension. Finally, we're going to point you in the direction of some very amazing and delicious free resources that you can take advantage of to implement strategy instruction in highly, highly effective ways. Here we have, as I mentioned, a zoomed in view of the language comprehension section of Scarborough's reading rope. A lot of us pay really close attention to those individual strands that lead to language comprehension. And I dare say many of us can probably recite them all from memory if we made this slide go dark. One of them at the top, background knowledge. Boy, is it an important thing. Absolutely. I've presented on that numerous times. I've written on it. It's a great thing, but it's not the thing, is it? Look at all the other strands and so forth. Again, you're going to hear Dr. Laud offer some quotes and even some sound bites straight from these reading scientists and experts regarding how it's been overemphasized at the expense of some of those other strands we see here, and at the expense of something else on this visual metaphor. Why did we zoom in here? What is that something else? It's something that many people tend to not notice. It's just kind of this big arrow, and somehow it doesn't get as much notice as the individual strands. It says increasingly strategic, indicating that over time, as students learn more about all of those strands, they become twisted together, and in so doing, the student becomes increasingly so how do you say that? Strategic, as they read all the different types of texts that they encounter. Becoming increasingly strategic doesn't just happen automatically once they learn all the strands. It's not a foregone conclusion. As their teachers, we have to provide them with highly impactful strategies. Get the word strategies and strategic. We have to deliberately give them practice and pulling all of those important strands together. There is so much more impact than just zeroing in on teaching a single strand here, right? In many schools, though, that's a focus. And we have to have a yes, background knowledge and other things, not just a single focus on a single strand. I think that's a powerful sentence. We can't give a single focus to a single strand. For too long, strategies too have become discredited. I have a mea culpa that I'll probably be sharing with you in a little bit. Perhaps that happened because how to best teach those strategies in ways that have actually give us significant impact took a while to become refined. But we have such better ways now, ways that we are really, really excited to show you today. Again, we guide students over time on the rope. This is where strategy instruction comes in. Let's not ignore this part of the rope that shows students how they benefit best when they are using all of those individual strands strategically. Okay. So, what are those strategies that allow students to apply their knowledge, their vocabulary, and all those other strands effectively for huge impact? Well, it inspires a vision for me, and I hope for you, and I know for Dr. Laud, a vision of students who can ultimately comprehend independently and learn more effectively. Zaretta Hammond, who I'm so tickled to say is going to be our keynote speaker at the Reading League Conference in October. She wrote a quote that sums up this vision. I'll read it to you. One of the goals of education is not simply to fill students with facts and information, but to help them learn how to learn. Wow. Imagine for a moment, what if schools focused on ensuring that when content-rich, complex texts are provided, students have learned how to use strategies to comprehend them deeply, and they actually have rich, deep discussions about them. Can you imagine the gains we'd see in language comprehension and overall reading comprehension and overall learning? It's so possible, but we won't get there if we focus too heavily on one strand, a single strand. The focus has to be helping students learn how to learn. Students who have learned how to I can't say these words today, strategically engage deeply with any text and build their language comprehension and learn from what they read. What a vision. And it's not inquiry or discovery learning that we're talking about here, where students go off and learn. And thinking of it this way would discredit, decades of scientific research. This is a structured way for students to learn how to learn. And yes, at the same time, we're also teaching background knowledge, vocabulary, other strand components. This is a yes and. Okay, so I'll hand this over to Dr. Laud, who can now show you all the misunderstandings and about building background knowledge with some interesting tidbits for you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Murray. So we're now going to go over a growing misunderstanding in our field that knowledge building is a bigger factor and worthy of more attention than the other rope strands, which is not true. We want to share with you that we held this misunderstanding too. So full disclosure, when I first heard about the importance of knowledge building, I was all in. It was 2012, Common Core had just come out, and I was at conferences and working with state leaders and hearing over and over that we need to build knowledge. And I was incredibly excited about this. I was really excited in 2012 when the new anthologies came out, and they were 50-50, 50 informational texts and 50 literature, authentic literature from real authors. The quality step up was absolutely amazing. And the idea of the complexity of the text, the rich text and the reach text. I mean, these sent reverberations through our nation because we suddenly had these higher level, more complex texts to reach toward and informational texts within them. Then I began thinking about text sets and pairing text. So if I was reading Bud Not Buddy, I could pair that with texts about the jazz era or the Depression era. And we could be building knowledge while also reading literature. The possibilities seemed amazing. And I was certain that this was the missing piece. This is what I'd not been hitting well enough. And this was going to move my students. I was going to conferences, reading books, and I was, as I said, all bought in. However, I went back into my classroom, worked with my students, and I quickly realized that I could never build all of the knowledge that my students needed. And I quickly saw that by focusing and putting knowledge building at the front of my teaching, that I was over-focusing on that strand to the detriment and giving less attention to the other strands. And so we need to explicitly and systematically teach all of the strands and teach strategies so that students can become increasingly strategic. And the exciting part that we're really looking forward to getting to in this webinar with you is that there is so much recent research and these strategies for how to teach, inferencing, main idea, summarization. These have been distilled and refined through many recent studies, particularly in the past year or so, and we're so much better at this. There are better ways to do it. Schools have not been implementing the strategies the way they were intended, and that is why we've not seen them take hold as well as they can and really should. But first, a little bit more on the growing misunderstanding that we're seeing in our field. So in a recent wonderful core webinar, Dr. Sharon Vaughn commented on her worry around this growing fixation with knowledge building. Like us, she sees the importance. We see the importance too, but she cautioned against losing sight of the other strands and how to teach those well. So let's hear from her directly in a clip from her outstanding recent core webinar, where she emphasizes the difference between the role of knowledge and how to build knowledge. The role of building knowledge is important, but we're losing sight of how to actually do that.
Is knowledge essential to reading comprehension? Yes. How is it that we build knowledge? So that is a much more important question.
Okay. So what Dr. Vaughn clarified was that we have over-focused on the importance of background knowledge, but not enough on how to build it. And she goes on in that core webinar, which we highly recommend listening to talk about the decades of research into main idea or just instruction and how strategies can be so helpful to building understanding of individual text and knowledge over time. Similarly, Dr. Amy Ellman, a prolific researcher, recently echoed this same concern, actually last year right here at Patton.
However, knowledge is only part of the answer. We've had a lot of talk about knowledge, and strategy instruction has kind of gotten thrown out. But as I told the group earlier, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
So that's a really important metaphor. She's cautioning throwing the baby, which is strategies, out with the bathwater. Yes, strategies can be taught better, but she's making an incredibly strong cautionary statement in telling us don't toss out the baby as well. Similarly, Anna Geiger, a former teacher who blogs and runs a powerful podcast on the science of reading. She noted the same recently in her blog. She said, but I've seen an unintended side effect, the tossing out of reading comprehension strategies entirely. Not only did we overcorrect and give too much focus to background knowledge, unfortunately, or to building knowledge, unfortunately with that, strategies, a core feature of the science of reading, were outright dismissed. This was a wholesale rejection. This was not an and both, despite so much evidence that when taught well, strategies are vital to comprehension outcomes. It couldn't be clearer. Dr. Jennifer Buckingham has said the same.
There was a rejection of the idea that comprehension strategies are a useful thing to teach, and that children can actually be taught comprehension.
So this is really important because we can teach comprehension, as all the scientists have shown and as all the research has shown. In fact, Dr. Tammy Williams saw the same phenomenon that I saw in my classroom. She saw it district-wide. This is why this matters so much. In abandoning strategies, we're losing ground.
We let the pendulum swing a little bit too far to just thinking about building knowledge and that was what was going to carry us through for building comprehension. And so we really didn't do as much with strategy instruction. And I remember at the end of the year, we didn't do as well on the state assessments. And I remember thinking to myself, we might have missed the boat here.
So just to be clear, this is abandoning science when we abandon what science has shown us for decades and decades, which is that teaching strategies, when done well, and we're about to dive into how to do this well, by abandoning that, we're abandoning science. We have done this before in our field. We have turned our back on science and adopted practices that are not supported by science, and we've seen the ramifications of doing that. Let's not do that again. The ELA proficiency for thousands, hundreds of thousands of students can go down if we reject science in this way. This is a trend that I've been noticing and collecting data on, and I hope to be able to provide another presentation on these data patterns, but they show the same thing that Dr. Tammy Williams has found, that by adopting knowledge building without keeping an equal and explicit focus on teaching the most high lever strategies, not just the activities in the programs, but bringing in and also teaching the most high lever strategies. This is the part of the rope that will enable ELA proficiency to rise. We didn't need to miss the boat. Clear voices have been warning against rejecting strategies. From the beginning, Dr. Timothy Shanahan, former director of the Chicago Public Schools Literacy Program and researcher, has been cautioning about this, and still is. Just a few weeks ago on a wonderful podcast that I highly recommend you write down, the Literacy View, and be sure to watch. It's, I think, one of the best out there. On this show, he said, if you are building knowledge with the idea that this will raise reading achievement, that's a big mistake. Here is the main logic breakdown. that we could teach all knowledge so students can read any passage on any topic, and this will never work. As Dr. Maria Murray, who's here with us today, published almost a decade ago, it's not possible for educators to teach the required background knowledge for every text that students will encounter as they progress through their school years, and certainly not afterwards. And put a pin in that. We're going to come back to how we can never build all the background knowledge that students and then moving into life will need. In fact, research has been misrepresented. And these terms look similar, but they're miles apart. Building knowledge is not the same as background knowledge instruction. Building knowledge is slow, done over time, with the goal to build all knowledge. Good to build knowledge, but this will not raise ELA outcomes. On the other hand, very different, background knowledge instruction is quick, pre-teach that rich content and then have students apply strategies to learn more about that content. Research has found that background knowledge instruction, this pre-teaching of content in order to get kids ready to apply strategies to learn more about that topic, this does raise ELA outcomes. So we do want to be pre-teaching the content about whatever topics our students are going to be applying strategies to learn about. A call to end reading comprehension instruction, again, contradicts science. It's inaccurate to say that research backs building knowledge as a lever. It does not. In fact, there have been negative effect size outcomes in studies that have foregrounded the building of knowledge. What research does back, and what all these studies that are being cited and posted, what they're talking about is building background knowledge or pre-teaching. Background knowledge instruction, again, which is pre-teaching and then applying strategies quickly right away at the front and center. What happens when we do foreground and give the appropriate attention and love to these strategies? The sky is the limit. Our students who we may have thought, here's what's possible, can go so much higher. We're going to hear from Dr. Wijayakumar, who is really one of the leading researchers in our nation. If you don't know that name, Wijayakumar, you want to look her up. You want to know her research. She was just given another $15 million in federal dollars to scale the amazing work that she's doing. She ran a study on main idea instruction, and she saw significant gains. And I'd like you to just hear her voice and hear how excited she is about the gains that she's seeing in the schools she's working with.
At the end of the year, we had 100% of the children pass the end of year STAR test with flying colors.
When you hear her and her lab assistants and co-PIs speak about this research, you can just get this vision of what could be possible for our students. She was working with the Keller School in Texas, and I'm a sleuth and a detective, and I went and looked up that school, and I found the year she was there. They had a 7% ELA gain in the grades that she was working with. So we're going to talk more about that. But strategies are incredibly important. Every school that's using them effectively, implementing them well, is seeing gains in the research that I've collected. So when we use strategies to build language comprehension, we equip students to better learn from text, as happened in this study. In fact, it just gets even better. Dr. Trina Spencer, who is one of my all-time favorite researchers, I listened to a podcast that she did, and I've followed her work, and she goes even deeper into teaching strategies and schemas, building language schemas. Dr. Jimmy Kim is working on building conceptual schemas, but when we go even deeper, strategies and schemas, the knowledge comes for free. So I'll let you hear from the brilliant Trina Spencer, Dr. Trina Spencer, so you can hear how she describes this.
Knowledge is good. We need to teach content, but here you go. If we actually teach the patterns of language, the content comes for free. And the patterns of language is what's transportable across content.
What she's saying was one of the biggest ahas of my career. And I credit Dr. Tiffany Hogan, who's also been explaining this and talking about this. We need to teach strategies and schemas so that we can build the underlying capacities and language. And that is transportable across text and to any text so that students can learn how to learn and can approach any text. It's so liberating. So let's all agree. Increasing background knowledge and vocabulary is only a part, it's a single strand to improving reading comprehension. Students need to become more strategic and independently learn from a text. And I just have to bring Zaretta Hammond up again because she is such a source of inspiration and she offers such a powerful and far more scientifically accurate vision as the goal. She is very tied to science. Teach strategies so that students can learn how to learn even after they leave us. Okay, I'm going to turn this back to Dr. Murray now so that we can dive into the part we're really excited about, which is how to teach strategies.
Thank you, Dr. Lott. Guess what? I was muted. So we're going to move into more specifics of using the strategy instruction to help students become more strategic and build language comprehension. Why don't we go to the next slide and once more note this key element of Scarborough's reading rope, increasingly strategic. This is what we're talking about. All right. But what are we not talking about? Uh-oh, this is not what we're talking about. But many of us might recognize how strategy instruction used to be taught. This series of comprehension reading strategies books put out by the Barnell Loft series, we used to call them, pretty excellent example of what used to happen. Inside were mundane passages where students practiced isolated comprehension skills, in this case, getting the main idea. Publishers such as this just missed the boat, and that might explain the statement, old main idea is not working from a recent ILA podcast. Yes, publishers misunderstood, and as a result, materials weren't that great. They weren't that effective. And that's not surprising. We should have seen better outcomes. I wonder if this helps to explain how educators and publishers and others were so willing to turn away from strategy instruction and put all of their language comprehension eggs in the background knowledge basket. Let's look at another another example of not so great materials. This is from the year 2000 anthology. Another example of curriculum developers doing a lackluster translation of research. What do you see as some problems here? I'll pause for a moment to let you scan it. Okay. I did a pop out of the words activate prior knowledge, which isn't from the teacher's manual here. What you see here probably is that read aloud text. It's not that engaging, is it? No rich vocabulary, no rich anything. All kids know about telephone calls and stormy days, I would presume. Most of them would. And to activate prior knowledge, teachers are directed to ask a simple question about what to do on a stormy day. We're not going to activate much of anything, definitely not a comprehension strategy. The story content is just so commonplace. And so, as Dr. Lott noted earlier, we've come a long way from basals like this and programs like this after the Common Core State Standards in 2012. Texts are meatier. We don't have activate prior knowledge using low quality ways with mundane texts any longer. Now that we know better, shouldn't we be doing better? Well, here are the high impact strategies that will help us do better. These are 4 of the most well-supported strategies to build reading comprehension. G for gist, I for inference, F for fix-up strategies, and T for text structure / summary. Fix-up strategies, I'll go back to that one for a second, are things like previewing the text, reading and rereading the text, identifying some key ideas, asking some questions, making connections to background knowledge, etc. So these high impact strategies spell GIFT. We're going to give an example now of how impactful these GIFT high impact strategies are. And we're going to start with one that Dr. Laud and I did using very complex text. Here it is. And I want you to think for a minute as you read this. How would you go about comprehending it? Well, here's my moment to tell you my own personal story. I've used this passage in presentations in the past, and I used this exact passage to illustrate how without background knowledge and how without vocabulary, you stand very little chance to comprehend something like this. And there's truth to that. You do, you need to have background knowledge and vocabulary to understand this, but is that really the be all and end all? Let's see how using the GIFT high impact strategy served Dr. Laud and I to comprehend this. We immediately got to work and applied those fix-up strategies, some of them. We read and reread. We asked some friends, we phoned a friend, and we Googled to pre-teach ourselves the vocabulary. See, that was us doing the heavy lift. We learned one term is the disease. It's a human kidney disease. 2 terms are parts of the kidney affected by this disease. 3 terms are tests that are used to view the affected kidney parts to accurately identify the presence of the disease. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Next thing we did was to break the passage down into sentences, and we color-coded those for you here as we go forward. So you'll see blue and darker blue and a purpley color, sentences 1, 2, and 3. After breaking the text down into sentences, we used the summary strategy. We summarized each sentence into our own words, focusing on the key noun, the who, and the verb. Did what? So here's the first sentence that seemed at one point so intimidating, but now we summarized it simply, and we put it in Comic Sans font to represent what a student would do here. We now have the glomeruli look normal using light microscopy. Okay, getting somewhere. Here are the strategies of text structure and summary happening. We summarized sentence 2, as you can see. I'll read it for you. The summary is, the disease can be seen using electron microscopy. Now, the word however, which we have bolded here, that alerted us to the text structure, which is another strategy. The word however let us know that something is being compared to something else in the previous sentence. That's a contrast. We comprehended that using this test, the presence of the disease is more visible. And finally, another strategy used here was inference. I underlined the I for you and for the GIFT. The epithelial foot process is the who. It's the part of the kidney that's not functioning in this disease. And we could infer that the did what was there too, that the epithelial foot process problem is noted by this kind of test. All right, electron microscopy for the wind. What did we do next? Sentence 3 summarized in words. The words usually negative. We could infer that this kind of text isn't really reliable in finding the disease. Our sentence is immunofluorescence might not find the disease. So the who, that test, that immunofluorescence, might not find the disease. Okay, so yep, here it is all back again in one piece as it was. But now the two of us, we have a gist. We can make a main idea statement. And guess what? We didn't have any background knowledge or vocabulary coming into this. So I'm going to read aloud our main idea statement that we would have written, or that we did write. This disease can't be seen using light microscopy, but it can be seen, with electron microscopy. Immunofluorescence is not a reliable test for it. Wow, what a huge takeaway we have here. And I hope it highlights for everyone that the goal can never be to teach all possible knowledge. It just can't. The goal has to be to give our students the strategies they need to learn how to learn. This is an equity issue. Without getting to the main idea of what we read, we don't have comprehension. It's the very thing that is going to give us agency as learners. Okay. So some research using Erickson's deliberate practice framework, which provides students with the ability to learn how to learn what we're talking about, is something I once wrote about with a colleague. It's available for free and on that link below if you're interested in it. And this framework lays out the deliberate practice it takes so that students do most of the lifting needed, not us. It's them doing that lifting that will turn them into proficient comprehenders of text as they become increasingly complex. Think about a skill someone has and how they came to be proficient in it. How did they learn to hit that tennis ball with accuracy or speak that language so fluently? Well, it was a mix of the three elements of deliberate practice here. Coaches and teachers do these three things to help their learners and athletes and whatever practice more and more advanced skills. Knowing the abilities of the learner, a steady progression of task difficulty to advanced skills, and immediate and valid feedback to the learner. If one or more is missing, students aren't likely to make that progress we need them to make. A familiar example that actually lacks all three when you think about it is when we would provide students leveled text at their instructional level, right? We probably didn't understand the real abilities they had because we assessed poorly, and we probably didn't provide, and we definitely didn't provide more difficult text. We kept them at that one level. And we might not have provided explicit feedback on other things as they were becoming more experts, even things like decoding skills. So yikes on that. Okay. I'm going to move to the next slide and just talk about a cautionary tale here. And that's when when teachers assign these complex texts, they often do all the lifting. Students are given so many supports on the front end to comprehend it. We read the text aloud to them, to the whole class sometimes. We feed them all of that vocabulary, the metaphors, the phrases in advance. And then when left alone to comprehend the text, and that they might read on their own, they don't have that capability to do it on their own. And how sad that if no strategies were provided to them to help how to learn, we're not able to hold on to that vision that most of our students should be ascending that text complexity staircase on their own with less teacher support. And this, again, can happen if we provide them with strategy instruction and deliberate practice in applying those strategies. So let's see this in action in a wonderful video.
So we've been talking about strategies and the missing link to effectively applying reading comprehension strategies, and that missing link being the deliberate practice. So the work that I do with schools is helping them take on reading comprehension strategies through the deliberate practice model that Dr. Murray just shared with you, and then watching students soar. It's somewhat like pixie dust. You teach the strategy, you model it, you practice it, you're doing the heavy, and then at one point, the students become independent and you watch their learning just fly. And for the past 18 years, I've been deep in this work and watching this happen every spring, and it's magical. Sometimes it happens earlier in the year, but you can see that these kids are digging into a text on a topic that they know very little about. Please pay attention to how independently they are working and look at the language level that they're using.
When the animals did what? Okay, when the animals hibernate, that would cover who they did what. When and where. We can just do when, like in the winter. And then why what happens. So the animals stay from the cold to they also have they store food in their body, inside their body, so they can survive through the 6 or 8 months. They don't have because the food is scarce.
So do you see that rich vocabulary development, the schemas that they're building around animal survival and animal hibernation? And what do you see that's not there? What is missing? There's no teacher. Who's doing the heavy lift? The kids. They've got this complex text. They're discussing it, they're pulling it apart, and they're taking notes as they learn, similar to what Dr. Murray and I did with the glomeruli passage. They are digging in. They are doing the heavy lift, the hard work of figuring out this knowledge that they don't have yet, and they're building it. So yay for the complex text, the rigor, the informational building, writing about science and social studies, all great stuff. And let's bring in strategies at the forefront to enable our kids to be able to learn from any of these passages. So this has been the missing piece. The missing piece has been the deliberate practice. How many of you have given students strategies and then they don't apply them? It's the deliberate practice that gets us to where you see these students. And certainly it's not the materials that Dr. Murray showed you earlier, like a workbook on main idea. No, those gone. Let's use real rich texts. There are so many knowledge building, wonderful curricula out there. Let's use these and let's dig into the text with these strategies. This is the same idea. These are students in a district in Bradley, Tennessee. And the teachers have taught strategies through the deliberate practice gradual release model until the students use them independently. And they're working out of Open Court, another rich knowledge building anthology. And they're learning about an important social studies topic. And the students are applying all of the strategies as they learn about this theme in that unit in their text. So these kids were actually told that this was a practice cold assessment. And they were handed out paper independently. The coach was going nuts. My phone was lighting up. I was getting picture after picture. She's like, they're all doing it without any prompting. The kids were digging in, writing the strategies on the paper and following them. So the strategies are what help them get the knowledge. And now we're at the free giveaway. We are very excited to share this with you. So we're going to share with you a free, simple, high impact strategy. The one that Dr. Wijukumar spoke about earlier when she said all the students passed the internal assessment. I dug in and found out her school had gone up 7%. Notice that this is a transferable routine that you would use over and over with your texts. So what this chart shows to orient you is across the top are the 3 main text structures. Text structures for the win. We know that those have decades of research and they are really important to use and teach. But how? This is a really clear, simple method. We have comparison, cause effect, and problem solution are the 3 ways that an informational text will be structured. Then this simple, light lift, easy to use strategy that you can fold into any curriculum. Step 1, figure out what text structure it is. That was the key that unlocked the glomeruli passage for me personally. When I saw that word, I was completely stuck. I was the kid who had absolutely zero comprehension. And then I was teasing through it with Dr. Murray. And then I was like, wait, however, hang on, they're contrasting something here. And that was the key that got me into the text. And I hear that over and over from teachers, that when kids figure out the text structure, then they can get an entry to a really hard stretch, reach complex text. So number one, figure out the structure. A cheat sheet you can use are these keywords. You can look for those. Number two, make a main idea statement with a stem. So main idea on its own, that's a little messy, but main idea with a structure, who did what, as we showed you earlier, or with one of these stems, very powerful. So we haven't been giving kids enough tools, or we've been giving them blunt tools and saying they're not sharp enough to work. We have to fix the tools and the delivery, and then they do work. And so number one, figure out the text structure. Number two, write a sentence. And then number three, expand it to a summary and make inferences. This is a simple routine. It takes 20 minutes. We've done parts of it in only 5 and seen big impact from even shorter segments of it. So how would we use this? First, we find the keyword. As I said earlier, that word, however, was like the key that opened the door to the room for me. I had no background knowledge on this topic, and I never would. I wouldn't have studied this throughout my college years. I was on a different track. I wasn't bio. And if I got this disease, it would be really important for me to be able to understand this. So I found the word, however. Then we made main idea statements. And what we figured out was these were 3 tests, and they were being compared on how well they find the disease. Now I have a rock solid schema and understanding. To make a fuller summary and deepen and solidify your understanding, we would summarize the key points, and then this is when you would teach inferencing. Inferencing is very teachable. Once you teach it, it will transport across text. There is a myth out there that inferencing can only happen if we have knowledge. That is absolutely not true. There's research out of the Harvard lab, I think Jimmy Kim's team, research from Dr. Wijakumar that shows absolutely teach a child how to infer, and they will apply that to a new text that they have no knowledge of. All right, now let's try this on your text. How many CKLA users do we have here? If you use CKLA, then you know that you teach The Boy Who Cried Wolf. By the way, that is a phenomenal program. I'm not here to promote any, but this is a very nice one. You teach The Boy Who Cried Wolf. What text structure would you guess that The Boy Who Cried Wolf is? Which of on the list here? Feel free to put it into chat. If we have polls, we should have a poll to poll everybody on which of these 3. But feel free to use chat.
I'm getting a cause effect.
Okay. And it's cause effect because it's not problem solution, which most stories are, but it's cause effect because there was a cause, the boy had exaggerated, and the effect was, I think he didn't have a good ending at the end of that story. The problem didn't get solved. Okay, next, let's make a main idea statement. The main cause is the boy exaggerated, and the main effect is people didn't believe him when he was really in danger. Third, we turn that into a summary. And we put the big idea, the little ideas, and the wrap up in our summary. And that is so powerful for reading comprehension. How would we integrate this in with whatever curriculum you use? Here is a scope and sequence from CKLA. You would weave this in daily. So I'm going to get a little granular because there's probably CKLA so popular. K2, you have read aloud and application. We weave this into the application. Or if we finish the read aloud early, we put it in there. 3-5, you have read aloud and language arts. We weave it in during the language arts application. Often there's overlap and some of these activities are there. But the beauty of this approach is that you pick it up and you use it every week overlaid on top of your curriculum so the kids get a routine. We know kids love routines. They love when they know the same activities are coming after every single story that they read. Another example, into reading. So how would we do this with a novel? You'd take an excerpt and whatever section you read aloud that day, you would apply it to that section. So here's a wonderful book from HMH, another terrific program, a lot of rich knowledge building. There's a whole section on inventors. They spend a lot of time looking at early inventors, building the schema of creating something to solve a problem. Beautiful program. This passage that we would be looking at would be an excerpt, the first page prologue on Thomas Edison. And what would the story structure be for Thomas Edison inventing the light bulb? If you voted for problem solution, that makes the most sense. So then we would create a statement using the main idea or using the STEM. So the cause of the problem is people needed light. The main problem wasn't working, what Edison was trying, and the solution was he finally got there. Then you would build this out to a summary of the story, and then that's when you would practice your higher order inferencing skills and teach strategies for inferencing. How do we build this in? So Into Reading is a different structure. It goes week by week, and you have your different bands. We build this into the reading band. And again, there's often overlap. Main idea is sometimes practiced, but instead of having like a unit on main idea, that doesn't work. You teach main idea all year long, September through June, and you're practicing it every single day, not to get good at the strategy, but to access the text. So it's not like you practice this 10 times and then you're good to go. No, no, no. You teach it once, maybe twice, model it, and then the kids are using the strategy all year long to access the text. So there are much more effective ways to teach main idea. Main idea, you've come a long way, baby. It's been light years since where we were back with that Barnell Loft, workbook. This is a transportable strategy that is a routine that should be used every day with your knowledge building texts. Once they have the main idea, then you can go into the deeper learning. So if they have background knowledge, great, that's a bonus. If not, then you teach the texts through main idea, through summary, get that knowledge, and then move into practicing these. All right, as we said, there are freebies. You have won some freebies. I think that they are posted just below our session, but in case, here are our first freebies. You get articles. You get a free article from ILA that I believe is open source. You get the Reading League article. And here is what we were showing. So we did a lot of research for this webinar, and we tried to find the easiest layout, the most teacher-friendly layout of Dr. Wijukumar's research. That's in, oh, and now the best part. You have all just won, not a car, but close, maybe even better. You have all just won free access to an online course on the strategies that we have just shared with you. Because as I said, research, scientists back strategies. The science world is all reading, science of reading is all about reading comprehension strategies. And so is our federal government, because to get federal funding, you have to go through an intensive peer review scientific research process. And Dr. Wijukumar just got $15 million in additional federal tax dollar funding from a panel of rigorous PhD reviewers who've looked at her data, looked at her outcomes, and said, yes, strategies work, to the point where it's worth scaling these, trying to get them into every classroom. So you're helping her with her mission, you're helping the federal government with what they're trying to do to get this science to all classrooms. Okay, all right, a few key takeaways now. How many of you are familiar with the baseball study? Go ahead and put a yes into chat if you are familiar with the baseball study.
Lots of yeses and a few
Okay,
no's.
lots of yeses streaming in. Okay, and no no's or a couple of no's?
Couple of no's.
Okay, all right. So I'll give you a quick orientation to it. Group A in the baseball study were strong readers who knew nothing about baseball. There were a couple of groups, but the important other group was Group B, had lower standardized scores on ELA assessments. However, they knew a lot about baseball. So they actually did better than Group A. However, this was done 25 years ago, before we had the research we now have. And Dr. Timothy Shanahan has brought this up a lot. There was no Group C. What if there was a Group C that had been taught strategies? We have that group. We have Group C. There have been decades of research since this study that have looked at Group C taught strategies, and they outperform both. Even the weakest readers are coming up to grade level and surpassing. So they are passing stronger readers with only strategies. There's so many studies out where there's no knowledge, pre-taught, taught, nothing. And the kids hit these passages, but they've got the strategies that Dr. Murray and I showed. So we have that. The group C outperforms both. Strategies are your best bet. Students with these strategies fare the best. Now I have a big reveal. Even the authors of the baseball study have the last word still. If you pull up that 1998 study, these science researchers never meant for the misinterpretation of their research to be used to back this disproportionate emphasis on building knowledge in general. That wasn't what they were looking at. Their conclusion was, in light of the importance of adequate prior knowledge, strategy instruction, and the knowledge base should be equally considered in the design of instruction. They recommended reading comprehension instruction. That has been the through line of the scientists all through. As I said earlier, we've been here before. Our field stepped away from science before. Fortunately, Emily Hanford and others have come along and helped get us back on track. Let's not do the same thing with comprehension. Let's hold tight to the scientists, to the science, to what research is showing us, to what the very researchers from the baseball study themselves concluded. Keep strategy front and center. Talking about knowledge building, you have to bring up Dr. Courtney Hatton. She has said that strategies have gotten a bad rap, that they're being dismissed. And she, in her work, looks at activating background knowledge. And she and Amy Ellman and others have found kids do not automatically activate their background knowledge, even if they have it. So even if we're building background knowledge, that may be one of the reasons why scores are going down. Students need to be taught strategies to activate their background knowledge. And that is what Courtney Hatton looks at. I cannot recommend looking into her work strongly enough. So she recommends pre-teaching what students need to know or helping them effectively activate their background knowledge. And then this is so incredibly important, reframe the knowledge gap to privilege students' knowledge as assets. Support students in activating, integrating, and revising their knowledge as they learn. So much research on this as well. And then use evidence-based instructional techniques to pre-teach and build the knowledge per topic. And as a side, yes, knowledge will build over the time, absolutely, particularly with all the new materials we have coming out. We're going to be doing that. But let's remember the rope, and let's stay anchored in the rope and in science. We are so glad, I'm so glad that building knowledge has gotten more attention. That was a neglected area of the rope. But it is a thing, not the thing. And the thing that will move students is strategies, becoming strategic. So let's move the conversation ahead now. We've welcomed building knowledge right into the fold. Yay, you're here. So glad to have you. And you're one of a team. And let's move this forward, and let's bring our focus to the most important part, which is the entwining of the ropes and becoming increasingly strategic so that we can work to ultimately build that language comprehension. As Dr. Sharon Vaughn often says, comprehension is an outcome of many things, of being able to decode, read the words, know what they mean, have some knowledge, either pre-taught or activated, or they've got it in their stores, many ways to have that knowledge. And also, decades of Dr. Vaughn's work has shown that strategies are what enable us to reach the outcome of comprehension. So strategies are important to the fuller picture. Please don't ditch them, use them better.